The scanner beeped 3 times in quick succession, breaking the monotony of deep space travel. Sam Rivers lifted his head from the maintenance panel he'd been working on and glanced at the small display screen mounted above his workbench. A red dot pulsed steadily against the black star field, growing larger with each sweep of the sensor array. Sam wiped grease from his hands with an old cloth and moved to the pilot's seat of his small exploration vessel. The Wanderer's Hope wasn't much to look at, just a converted cargo hauler with upgraded sensors and life support systems. She'd seen better days, but she was reliable, and that's all that mattered for long-range survey missions like this one. Unknown Contact was massive, at least 10 times the size of Sam's ship. Its energy signature didn't match anything in the human database, which meant it was either a new discovery or trouble. Given how far out Sam was from human space, trouble seemed more likely. A communication request flashed on his console. Sam accepted it, and his main screen filled with the image of something that definitely wasn't human. The creature had 4 arms, gray-scaled skin, and eyes that glowed with a pale blue light. It wore what appeared to be a military uniform, decorated with symbols that Sam didn't recognize. "Unknown vessel, you have entered territory controlled by the hegemony," the alien said in perfect English, though its voice carried an odd harmonic that made Sam's teeth ache. "State your purpose and prepare to be boarded." Sam leaned back in his chair and studied the alien's face. There was an arrogance there, a certainty that it held all the advantages in this situation. It probably did, at least on the surface. Sam's ship had minimal defensive capabilities, just enough shielding to protect against space debris and cosmic radiation. The alien vessel, on the other hand, bristled with weapon ports and sensor arrays. "This is Sam Rivers of the human exploration vessel Wanderer's Hope," Sam replied calmly. "I'm conducting a routine deep space survey. I wasn't aware this area was claimed by anyone." The alien's expression shifted slightly, and Sam caught a flicker of something in those glowing eyes. Interest, maybe, or recognition. "Human," the creature repeated, as if tasting the word. "Yes, we have heard whispers of your species. You will surrender your vessel and submit to interrogation. Any resistance will result in your immediate destruction." Sam nodded slowly. He'd expected this might happen eventually. Human space was expanding, and contact with hostile alien civilizations was always a possibility. The protocols were clear. In situations like this, gather as much intelligence as possible while minimizing the risk to human lives and colonies. "I understand," Sam said. "I'm powering down my weapon systems and dropping shields. Please don't shoot." The alien seemed surprised by Sam's quick compliance. Most species apparently put up more of a fight, but Sam had no intention of getting himself killed in a pointless battle. There were more important things to consider now. 20 minutes later, Sam felt the familiar vibration of a docking tube connecting to his ship's airlock. He'd spent the time securing his personal effects and ensuring that his ship's computer core was properly encrypted. The Wanderer's Hope carried detailed star charts and survey data that could be valuable to an enemy, but they'd need human encryption keys to access it. The airlock cycled open, and 3 armed aliens entered Sam's ship. They were the same species as the one who'd made contact, all gray-scaled and 4-armed, but these wore heavier armor and carried weapons that hummed with contained energy. They moved with military precision, quickly securing the small vessel, before one of them gestured for Sam to follow. The docking tube led to what was obviously a warship. The corridors were wide and well lit, with a cold efficiency that spoke of a civilization built for conquest. Crew members they passed stopped to stare at Sam with curious expressions, and he heard them speaking in their own language, voices carrying that same harmonic quality that made his skin crawl. They brought him to what appeared to be the ship's command center. It was larger than some buildings Sam had seen, with dozens of crew members working at stations arranged in concentric circles around a raised platform. On that platform stood the alien Sam had spoken with earlier. "I am Commander Wraith of the Hegemony 4th Fleet," the alien announced as Sam was brought before him. "You are now a prisoner of the Hegemony, subject to interrogation and eventual execution. However, your cooperation in providing information about human military capabilities And colony locations may earn you a less painful death. Sam looked around the bridge, taking in details. The weapon control stations, the shield generators, the communication arrays. Everything was laid out efficiently, but there were patterns here that spoke of limitations. Backup systems that could be overloaded, command structures that could be disrupted, weaknesses that could be exploited. "I'm just a survey pilot," Sam said mildly. "I don't know much about military matters." Commander Wraith studied Sam with those glowing eyes. "We shall see. Guards, take the human to holding cell 7. Begin standard interrogation procedures tomorrow." The holding cell was small but clean, with basic amenities and what appeared to be a food dispenser. Sam sat on the narrow bench that served as a bed and looked around. The walls were some kind of metal alloy, probably reinforced against most forms of physical damage. The door was solid, with no visible locking mechanism on this side. A small camera in the corner tracked his movements. Sam closed his eyes and began to concentrate. Deep in his brain, microscopic implants that had been installed years ago started to come online. They were designed to be undetectable by most scanning technologies, appearing as nothing more than medical devices to treat an old head injury, but they were actually sophisticated quantum communication arrays, capable of instantaneous contact across vast distances. The connection established itself slowly, reaching out through folded space to find the network of human colonies and military stations. Sam began to upload everything he'd observed: ship designs, weapon configurations, crew numbers, command structures. All of it flowed through the quantum link in bursts of encoded data that would be impossible for the aliens to detect or intercept. He also began another process, one that required careful timing and patience. The microscopic machines in his bloodstream, originally designed for medical monitoring, were being reprogrammed for a different purpose. Every surface he touched, every breath of recycled air, every contact with the ship's systems would leave behind traces so small they were practically invisible. But those traces would spread throughout the ship's environmental systems, creating a network of sensors that would map every critical system aboard the vessel. It would take time, perhaps several days, but eventually Sam would know this ship better than its own crew. Commander Wraith wanted information about human capabilities. Sam was happy to provide it, just not in the way the alien expected. By the time this was over, the hegemony would understand exactly what humanity was capable of. But first, Sam needed to wait. Patience was a virtue that humans had perfected over millennia of evolution and warfare. While his captors congratulated themselves on their easy victory, Sam would gather the intelligence needed to turn their triumph into their doom. The human closed his eyes and settled in to wait. He had work to do. The first meal arrived 6 hours after Sam had been locked in the holding cell. A guard with distinctive scarring across his left arm slid a tray through a slot in the door and waited. Sam looked at the food, but didn't move from where he sat, against the wall. The guard waited another minute, then shrugged and walked away. Sam had entered a state that his trainers called tactical meditation. To outside observers, he appeared completely motionless, but his mind was working on multiple levels. The quantum implants in his brain continued their silent communication with human space, uploading detailed scans of every hegemony crew member who passed by his cell. Facial recognition, gait analysis, vocal patterns, all of it was being processed and cataloged. More importantly, the microscopic machines he'd released were beginning to spread throughout the ship. Every time a guard touched his cell door, every breath of air that circulated through the environmental systems, every drop of moisture that condensed on the walls carried his invisible scouts deeper into the vessel's infrastructure. On the bridge, Commander Wraith reviewed the daily security reports with growing unease. The human prisoner had not moved in 18 hours. He sat in the same position, staring at the same section of wall, barely breathing. Medical scans showed he was alive and healthy, but his behavior was unsettling. "Perhaps the human is broken," suggested Lieutenant Vorn, Wraith's second in command. "Some species cannot handle the stress of capture. Their minds simply shut down." Wraith wasn't convinced. He'd conquered dozens of worlds and encountered hundreds of different species. Fear, anger, desperation, even resignation he understood. But this absolute stillness felt different. It reminded him of the way a predator waited in ambush, perfectly, motionless until the moment came to strike. "Double the guard rotation," Wraith ordered, "and increase monitoring of the prisoner. I want to know if he so much as blinks differently." The second day brought more of the same. Sam remained motionless in his cell while his microscopic army continued to map the ship. The hegemony vessel was impressive, built for intimidation as much as combat. Its weapons could level cities, its shields could withstand the firepower of entire fleets, and its engines could cross star systems in a matter of days. But every system had vulnerabilities. The plasma conduits that powered the ship's main weapons ran close to structural weak points. The shield generators relied on a central processing unit that could be overloaded. The life support systems had backup protocols that could be turned against the crew. Sam's invisible scouts found every weakness and reported it all back to human intelligence. Dr. Nall, the ship's chief science officer, became fascinated by the electromagnetic anomalies detected near the human's cell. The readings were so faint they barely registered on the ship's sensors, but they were persistent, waves of energy that seemed to pulse in complex patterns almost like a code. "It could be some form of biological process," Dr. Nall reported to Commander Wraith. "Many species produce electromagnetic fields as part of their neural activity. Perhaps humans generate stronger fields when under stress." Wraith studied the readings but couldn't make sense of them. Could it be some form of communication? "Impossible," Dr. Nall replied confidently. "The signal strength is far too weak to reach beyond the ship. And even if it could, there are no other human vessels in this star system. We've been scanning constantly." What Dr. Nall didn't understand was that quantum communication didn't rely on signal strength. It operated on principles that most alien civilizations hadn't discovered yet. The entangled particles in Sam's implants could communicate instantaneously, across any distance, carrying information that no conventional sensor could detect. On the third day, the crew's unease began to affect ship operations. Guards assigned to watch the human reported difficulty concentrating. The absolute silence from the cell was unnerving, and several crew members requested transfers to other duties. Commander Wraith denied the requests, but he understood their discomfort. There was something profoundly wrong about the humans' behavior. Wraith had expected interrogation to be routine. Most prisoners broke within hours, eager to provide information in exchange for better treatment. But this human hadn't spoken a single word since being confined. He hadn't touched the food brought to him, though medical scans showed he was somehow maintaining perfect health. Sam's consciousness existed on multiple levels now. Part of his awareness remained focused on his physical surroundings, monitoring the guards and tracking the ship's movements through hyperspace. But most of his mental capacity was devoted to processing the flood of data coming from his microscopic scouts. The ship's computer systems were more primitive than human technology, but they were well protected. Breaking through their security would require patience and careful planning. Sam's scouts were mapping network pathways, identifying access points, and preparing for the moment when he would need to take direct control of critical systems. He was also tracking the ship's course and destination. The hegemony vessel was heading for what appeared to be a major military base, probably where Sam would be transferred for more intensive interrogation. That gave him a timeline to work with. He needed to act before they reached their destination, while the ship was still isolated in hyperspace. The quantum link carried his analysis back to human space, where military planners were already putting his intelligence to use. Sam wasn't just a prisoner gathering information. He was the forward element of a much larger operation, one that had been planned for months before his capture. By the end of the third day, Sam's microscopic army had infiltrated every major system on the ship. His scouts had found their way into the power grid, the communication arrays, the weapon controls, even the food preparation systems. They waited in dormant mode, ready to activate on Sam's command. More importantly, they had given him complete access to the ship's external sensors. Sam now knew what the hegemony crew didn't. They were no longer alone in hyperspace. Human vessels had been shadowing them for the past day, staying just outside sensor range and matching their course perfectly. Commander Wraith sensed something was wrong, but he couldn't identify the source of his unease. The ship was operating. Normally, all systems showed green, and they were making good time to their destination. But the humans' continued silence was beginning to affect crew morale, and Wraith found himself checking the security feeds more frequently than necessary. The prisoner hadn't moved in 72 hours. He sat in perfect stillness like a statue carved from living flesh. His breathing was so slow it was barely detectable, his heart rate was abnormally low, and his brain activity showed patterns unlike anything in the hegemony's medical databases. What Wraith didn't realize was that Sam's apparent catatonia was actually the deepest form of human concentration. Every faculty of his enhanced mind was focused on the task at hand. He was simultaneously monitoring dozens of ship systems, maintaining communication with human forces and preparing for the most critical phase of his mission. The silence would end soon, and when it did, the hegemony would learn what it meant to underestimate humanity. Sam's eyes remained fixed on the wall, but behind them, his mind counted down the minutes until he would finally speak. The first words he'd spoken in 3 days would be the most important of his life. They would mark the beginning of the end for the hegemony's Fourth Fleet. The human was ready. It was time to spring the trap. 73 hours of silence ended with 4 words that echoed through every speaker on the ship. "You're already dead." Commander Wraith dropped the datapad he'd been reading and stared at the communication console in disbelief. The voice was calm, conversational, and completely impossible. The human prisoner was locked in a sealed cell with no access to ship systems. Yet somehow his words were being broadcast throughout the entire vessel. "How is he doing this?" Wraith demanded, turning to his communications officer. The officer's hands flew over his controls, checking every system and finding nothing out of place. "I don't know, sir. The communication array shows no unauthorized access. All security protocols are intact." Sam's voice continued as if he could hear their conversation. 72 hours ago, you made a critical error. You captured a human vessel without understanding what that means. We are not like other species you've encountered. We don't surrender because we're afraid. We surrender because it's tactically advantageous." Emergency lights began flashing on the bridge as crew members scrambled to identify how the human had gained access to their systems. Wraith felt a cold weight settling in his stomach. The human's tone was so matter-of-fact, so confident that it was more terrifying than any threat or demand would have been. "While you've been congratulating yourselves on this easy victory," Sam continued, "I've been mapping every system on this ship. I know your weapon placement, your shield generators, your engine specifications, and your crew complement. I know you have a microfracture in your port plasma conduit that will cascade into total system failure if stressed beyond normal parameters." Dr. Nall's scanner beeped frantically as he confirmed what the human had said. There was indeed a hairline crack in the port plasma conduit. So small it had been missed in routine inspections, but potentially catastrophic under combat conditions. "Impossible," Dr. Nall whispered. "He would need access to our internal sensor network to know that." Wraith felt his 4 hearts racing as the implications became clear. If the human could access their internal sensors, what else might he be capable of? "Cut all power to the prisoners section," he ordered. "Emergency lockdown protocols now." But Sam's voice didn't waver even as the lights dimmed in his cell. "But more importantly, I've been broadcasting everything I've learned about your technology and military capabilities. Right now, the Human Defense Network knows the exact location, heading, and vulnerabilities of your entire Fourth Fleet." The bridge erupted in chaos. Officers shouted conflicting reports about system intrusions that shouldn't have been possible. The ship's security officer reported that all detention systems showed normal operation, yet the prisoner was clearly in control of their communications. The tactical officer confirmed that there were no other vessels in sensor range, yet the human claimed to be in contact with his people. "This is impossible," Lieutenant Vorn said, his voice pitched higher than usual. "Our systems are completely secure. The human has no technology, no weapons, no way to access our networks." Sam's laughter echoed through the speakers, a sound devoid of humor. "You think security means putting up walls? Humans think security means understanding every possible way those walls can fall. While you relied on your technology to keep me contained, I was using mine to tear your ship apart from the inside. Commander Wraith realized that his worst fears were being confirmed. The electromagnetic anomalies Dr. Null had detected weren't random biological processes. They were some form of advanced technology that the hegemony's sensors couldn't properly identify. The human had been actively working against them from the moment he'd been captured. The tactical situation is quite simple, Sam continued. Your ship, along with every other vessel in your fourth fleet, is now completely compromised. I know which of your crew members have heart conditions, which of your officers are having relationship problems, and which of your systems will fail if I send the right signal to the maintenance routines I've been rewriting for the past 3 days. The medical officer confirmed with growing horror that the human was correct about crew health records. Personal files that should have been encrypted beyond any possibility of access had been read and analyzed. The human knew things about the crew that some of them didn't know about themselves. Your species conquers through superior firepower and intimidation, Sam said. You find a weaker civilization, overwhelm them with your technology, and add their resources to your empire. It's an effective strategy against most opponents. Wraith found his voice. What do you want, human? I want you to understand what you're really facing, Sam replied. This isn't first contact. This isn't even a diplomatic incident. This is a demonstration. The main view screen activated without anyone touching the controls. Instead of showing the swirling colors of hyperspace, it displayed a tactical readout of the surrounding area. Dozens of contacts appeared on the screen, ships that hadn't been there moments before. Your sensors are designed to detect ships using technology similar to your own, Sam explained. Human vessels use different principles. We've been studying your detection methods for months, learning how to remain invisible to your instruments. Right now, 37 human warships are surrounding your position. The tactical officer's readings confirmed what the screen showed. The human vessels had somehow materialized from nowhere. Their energy signature is completely different from anything in hegemony databases. They were sleek and predatory looking, built for speed and precision, rather than the brute force approach favored by hegemony designs. This is impossible, Wraith breathed. No species has technology that advanced. You've been thinking like conquerors, Sam said. Humans think like survivors. We've been preparing for contact with hostile alien civilizations. Since before we left our homeworld, every scenario has been planned for, every contingency covered. You thought you were capturing a lone explorer. Actually, you were taking the bait in a trap that's been months in the making. The truth hit Commander Wraith like a physical blow. The human's presence in their territory hadn't been accidental. His easy surrender, his cooperative behavior during capture, his strange silence, all of it had been calculated to achieve this exact situation. Your fourth fleet responded to what appeared to be an easy target, Sam continued. 43 vessels converged on my position, thinking they were collecting intelligence about a new species. Instead, you've gathered your entire military force, in exactly the position we wanted you. The tactical display updated to show the full scope of the trap. Every hegemony vessel in the Fourth Fleet was surrounded by human ships. The aliens had superior numbers, but they were scattered and unprepared for combat. The humans had achieved perfect positioning and tactical surprise. The question now, Sam said, his voice carrying a note of finality, is whether you're smart enough to realize that this demonstration is also an offer. You can fight and be destroyed as an example to other aggressive species, or you can surrender and learn why humanity doesn't need to rule the galaxy to control it. Commander Wraith looked around his bridge at the panicked faces of his crew. His officers were trained warriors, veterans of dozens of campaigns against primitive worlds. But they'd never faced an opponent like this. The humans had outmaneuvered them completely, turning their own tactical doctrine against them. The human's voice softened slightly, but the underlying steel remained. I've been silent for 3 days, Commander Wraith. I used that time to learn everything about your ship, your fleet, and your civilization. Now you have exactly 60 seconds to decide whether that knowledge will be used to destroy you or to save you. The countdown began, displayed on every screen throughout the ship. 60 seconds to choose between annihilation and surrender. 60 seconds to decide the fate of the hegemony's most powerful military force. Commander Wraith realized that the human had been right from the beginning. They were already dead. The only question was whether they would stay that way. The countdown reached 0, and Commander Wraith's shoulders sagged in defeat. Around the bridge, his officers waited for orders that he couldn't bring himself to give. Fighting would mean the death of everyone under his command. Surrender meant admitting that everything the hegemony believed about their military superiority was wrong. "We surrender," Wraith said quietly into his communication system. Sam's response was immediate. "Smart choice, Commander. Your crew will be transferred to human vessels for processing. You'll be treated according to standard prisoner protocols, which I think you'll find more civilized than your own methods." Within minutes, sleek human shuttles began docking with hegemony ships. Throughout the fleet, the alien crews watched in amazement as humans emerged from the craft. They were smaller than most hegemony soldiers, with only 2 arms and soft-looking skin, but they moved with a confidence that spoke of complete tactical control. The humans carried weapons that hummed with contained energy, but they also brought medical supplies and translation devices. Each boarding party was led by an officer who introduced themselves politely before beginning the transfer process. It was nothing like the brutal conquests the hegemony had conducted on other worlds. Sam's cell door opened for the first time in 3 days. He stood slowly, working the stiffness out of muscles that had remained motionless for too long. The guards who had been watching him backed away nervously as he stepped into the corridor. "The door's been unlocked for 18 hours, Sam said conversationally to Commander Wraith as they met in the ship's central hub. "I chose to stay where I was. Sometimes the most powerful move is not making one at all." Wraith studied the human with new eyes. Sam was unremarkable in appearance, middle-aged and wearing simple work clothes that had seen better days. But there was something in his posture and expression that commanded respect. This was someone who had just orchestrated the capture of an entire fleet while sitting motionless in a prison cell. "How long have you been planning this?" Wraith asked. Sam smiled, the first genuinely warm expression Wraith had seen from him. "Humans have been monitoring hegemony expansion for about 2 years. We've watched you conquer the Vel system, absorb the Trade Federation, and destroy the Crystal Worlds. Each victory taught us more about your tactics and technology." A human technician approached with a portable scanner and began taking readings from the ship's central computer. "We've been particularly interested in your method of identifying and targeting isolated colonies," the technician said, without looking up from her work. "Very efficient, but also very predictable once you understand the pattern." Wraith felt another shock of realization. "You've been protecting the worlds we were planning to attack." "Some of them," Sam confirmed. "The ones that couldn't protect themselves. Others we've been helping to develop better defenses. The galaxy is a big place, Commander. There's room for everyone if people are willing to cooperate instead of conquer." The human boarding parties worked with mechanical efficiency, cataloging hegemony technology, and transferring crew members to their own vessels. But Wraith noticed that they also provided food, medical attention, and even entertainment systems for the prisoners. It was consideration he'd never shown to his own captives. "This wasn't just about stopping our 4th fleet," Wraith said, understanding dawning in his mind. "You wanted us to see how you operate," Sam nodded approvingly. "The hegemony isn't evil, just misguided. You've built your entire civilization around the idea that strength comes from domination. Humans learned a long time ago that real strength comes from cooperation and preparation." A new group of humans entered the ship, and Wraith could tell immediately that these were different from the boarding parties. They moved with the easy confidence of people accustomed to command, and their equipment was even more advanced than what the soldiers carried. "Allow me to introduce Admiral Chen," Sam said as a woman in her 50s approached them. "She's been coordinating this operation from the human side." Admiral Chen studied Commander Wraith with intelligent eyes. "Your fleet is impressive, Commander. Well-trained crews, solid tactical doctrine, and technology that's advanced by galactic standards. Unfortunately, you've been fighting opponents who couldn't match your capabilities." Wraith found himself oddly flattered by the professional assessment. Our methods have been effective against every species we've encountered. That's exactly the problem, Admiral Chen replied. You've been winning too easily. When every battle is a foregone conclusion, you stop innovating. You stop preparing for real opposition. Humans have never had that luxury. The Admiral gestured to a portable display that showed a three-dimensional map of local space. Dozens of star systems were marked with various symbols, creating a complex picture of interstellar politics and military positioning. We've been fighting each other for thousands of years, Admiral Chen explained. Wars between nations, wars between planets, wars between star systems. We've had to develop strategies for facing opponents with equal or superior technology. The hegemony has been our first real test case for applying those strategies against an external threat. Sam pointed to specific systems on the display. Every world you've conquered in the past 2 years has been under human observation. We've documented your methods, analyzed your technology, and prepared countermeasures. More importantly, we've been helping other species do the same. The implications were staggering. The hegemony had thought they were expanding into uncontested space, but they'd actually been operating under constant surveillance. Every victory had been allowed to happen, either because the humans couldn't intervene in time, or because they'd determined it was strategically advantageous to let it proceed. The free colonies that defeated your 7th Fleet last month, Admiral Chen said casually. They were using human-designed weapons and human tactical advice. The Merchant Alliance that's been avoiding your trade embargo had human ships running supplies through your blockade lines. Wraith felt his worldview crumbling. Military defeats that had been blamed on bad luck or inferior commanders were actually the result of human interference. The hegemony's expansion had been slowing, not because they were reaching the limits of their territory, but because their opponents were getting better at fighting back. Why reveal this now? Wraith asked. You could have continued operating in secret, because secret wars have a way of becoming real wars, Sam replied. Eventually, the hegemony would have figured out that someone was helping their enemies. When that happened, you would have started looking for the source of the problem. That search would have led to human space, and then we'd be facing the kind of all-out conflict that nobody wants. Admiral Chen nodded agreement. This demonstration serves multiple purposes. It shows the hegemony that humans are not a target to be conquered. It shows other species that the hegemony can be defeated, and it offers everyone a better alternative to endless warfare. The transfer of prisoners was nearly complete. Hegemony, crew members were being loaded onto human transport ships with a care and efficiency that impressed even Wraith. No one had been harmed, no equipment had been unnecessarily damaged, and the humans had even provided replacement parts for critical systems that had been removed for analysis. What happens to us now? Wraith asked. Sam looked thoughtful. That depends on what the hegemony chooses to do with the information we're giving you. You can return to your territory and continue your expansion, knowing that humans will be opposing you at every step. Or you can accept that there are other ways to build a civilization. Admiral Chen handed Wraith a small device that looked like a standard communication unit. This contains detailed specifications for defensive technologies that will protect your worlds from external attack. It also includes proposed trade agreements and cultural exchange programs. The choice of how to use this information is entirely up to your government. Wraith stared at the device in his hands. It represented a complete reversal of everything the hegemony had built their society around. Instead of conquest and domination, the humans were offering cooperation and mutual defense. Why would you help us after what we've done? He asked. Because, Sam said simply, humans learned a long time ago that the best way to end a war is to make your enemy into an ally. The galaxy is full of real threats, Commander. Species that make the hegemony look peaceful by comparison. When those threats eventually show up, we're all going to need each other. The last of the human shuttles prepared to depart, leaving the hegemony crews in control of their own ships once again. But everything had changed. They were returning to their territory with the knowledge that they were not the dominant military force they had believed themselves to be. Wraith watched the human fleet begin to disperse, their ships fading from sensors as mysteriously as they had appeared. The demonstration was over, but its effects would be felt throughout hegemony space for years to come. The Fourth Fleet had set out to capture a single human explorer. They were returning home having learned that humanity was already aware of their existence, had been monitoring their activities for years, and possessed the capability to destroy them at will. It was, Wraith realized, exactly the lesson they had needed to learn. 3 months later, Commander Wraith stood in the meeting chamber of the Hegemony High Council, watching his superiors debate the most important decision in their civilization's history. The device Admiral Chen had given him sat on the central table, its simple appearance belying the revolutionary information it contained. The council members had spent weeks analyzing the human technology specifications, and the results were unsettling. The defensive systems were decades ahead of anything the hegemony possessed, but they were designed purely for protection. There were no offensive capabilities, no weapons that could be turned against enemies. The humans had shared the means to defend, but not to attack. "It's obviously a trap," declared Counselor Vex, his scaled face flushed with anger. "The humans defeat our Fourth Fleet and then offer us gifts. They want us to become dependent on their technology so they can control us." Wraith had heard this argument dozens of times in recent weeks. Many in the hegemony leadership refused to believe that any species would offer help without expecting something in return. The concept of genuine cooperation was foreign to their worldview. "The analysis teams have found no hidden functions in the technology," reported Chief Scientist Kale. "These are purely defensive systems, exactly as advertised. More concerning is the level of advancement they represent. If this is what the humans are willing to share openly, what capabilities are they keeping secret?" That question had haunted Wraith since his return. The human ships that had surrounded his fleet were clearly military vessels, but their true capabilities remained unknown. The boarding parties had carried weapons, but they'd never needed to use them. The humans had achieved total victory through superior intelligence and planning, not through force of arms. "The trade agreements are similarly puzzling," added Economic Advisor Tern. "The humans are offering favorable terms for resources we control, but they're not demanding exclusive access. They seem genuinely interested in mutual benefit rather than exploitation." The debate continued, but Wraith's attention drifted to the reports he'd been studying for weeks. Human agents had made contact with dozens of civilizations throughout the galaxy, offering the same choice the hegemony now faced. Some species had accepted the partnership and were already benefiting from human technology and protection. Others had rejected the offer and found their expansion efforts increasingly frustrated by well-armed opponents. The pattern was clear to anyone willing to see it. Humanity was reshaping the political landscape of the galaxy not through conquest, but through selective cooperation. They strengthened those willing to coexist peacefully and contained those who insisted on aggressive expansion. Commander Wraith, called the Council Prime, the oldest and most influential member of the ruling body, "You've spent more time with the humans than anyone. What is your assessment of their true intentions?" Wraith stood and faced the assembled leaders. These were individuals who had built their careers on military conquest and political domination. Explaining human psychology to them was like describing color to the blind. "I believe they mean exactly what they say," Wraith replied. "The humans are offering us a choice between cooperation and conflict. They prefer cooperation because it's more efficient and less destructive. But they're fully prepared for conflict, if we choose that path." "Impossible," snorted Counselor Vex. "No species achieves power and then offers to share it freely. There must be some hidden advantage they're seeking." "There is," Wraith said quietly. "They want to survive. The humans have studied galactic history, and they've learned that aggressive empires eventually collapse under their own weight. They're trying to build something more stable." The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. The hegemony's own expansion had been slowing in recent years, partly due to human interference but also because maintaining control over conquered territories was becoming increasingly difficult. "The humans showed me tactical analyses of 17 different galactic empires that have risen and fallen in the past 10,000 years, Wraith continued. "The pattern is always the same. Initial expansion through superior military technology, gradual overextension of resources, internal rebellion in conquered territories, and eventual collapse. The hegemony is currently at stage 3 of that process. Chief Scientist Kale activated a holographic display showing the hegemony's territory. Red zones marked areas where rebellions were active or brewing. Yellow zones indicated regions where loyalty was questionable. The amount of green, representing truly stable territory, was smaller than anyone wanted to admit. The humans are offering us a way to break that pattern, Wraith explained. Instead of maintaining control through fear and military occupation, we could maintain influence through voluntary association and mutual benefit. You're talking about dismantling everything we've built, Counselor Vex accused. The hegemony has brought order to dozens of star systems. Without our strength to maintain that order, chaos will return. The humans disagree, Wraith replied. They believe that order imposed from outside is ultimately unstable. True stability comes from systems that maintain themselves because the participants benefit from cooperation. The debate that followed was heated but ultimately predictable. The older council members, those who had built their careers on traditional conquest, were largely opposed to any partnership with humanity. The younger members, who had been dealing with the increasing difficulties of maintaining an overextended empire, were more open to alternatives. In the end, the decision came down to practical considerations rather than philosophical ones. The hegemony's military had suffered a humiliating defeat at human hands. Their expansion efforts were being thwarted by increasingly well-armed opposition. Their internal security was deteriorating as conquered worlds became more rebellious. Tarisi. Choice wasn't between cooperation and continued dominance. It was between cooperation and gradual decline. We will accept the human offer, announced Council Prime after a final vote. But we will proceed cautiously. Some territories will be granted independence as part of the transition to a cooperative model. Others will be offered the choice between continued association or full autonomy. It wasn't the complete transformation that Sam and Admiral Chen had hoped for, but it was a beginning. The hegemony would still exist as a political entity, but its methods would gradually change from conquest to cooperation. 6 months after the vote, Wraith found himself aboard a human diplomatic vessel, heading toward what had once been hegemony territory. The worlds they were visiting had chosen independence, and Wraith's job was to help negotiate the transition. It was strange work for someone who had spent his career as a military commander, but he found it surprisingly satisfying. The human diplomatic team was led by Sam Rivers, who had traded his explorer's coveralls for the formal attire of an ambassador. But his approach remained the same: careful observation, patient planning, and an almost supernatural ability to find solutions that benefited everyone involved. The Kryn Federation is interested in establishing trade relations with both humanity and the reformed hegemony, Sam reported as their ship approached the former hegemony world of Axis Prime. They're offering rare minerals in exchange for defensive technology and agricultural equipment. Wraith reviewed the proposed agreements with interest. The Kryn had been one of the first civilizations conquered by the hegemony, their peaceful nature making them easy targets. Now they were becoming independent partners in a growing network of cooperative worlds. The humans were right about stability, Wraith admitted. These voluntary associations are proving much more durable than our old system of military occupation. Sam smiled, that same warm expression Wraith remembered from their first meeting. Humans learn through painful experience that you can't build lasting peace through conquest. Real security comes from making sure everyone benefits from maintaining the current system. The ship's sensors detected their destination ahead, a green and blue world that had once cowered under hegemony rule. Now it was home to a thriving independent government that maintained friendly relations with both humanity and their former conquerors. "There's one thing I've never understood," Wraith said as they prepared for landing. "Why did you stay silent for 3 days? You could have revealed your capabilities immediately and achieved the same result." Sam was quiet for a moment, considering his answer. Because silence teaches patience and patience teaches wisdom. The hegemony had never encountered an opponent who could wait. Your entire military doctrine was based on quick, decisive action. By staying silent, I forced you to confront the possibility. that your assumptions about human nature were completely wrong. The shuttle touched down at a spaceport that bustled with ships from dozens of different worlds. Species that had once been enemies now traded freely under the protection of mutual defense agreements. It wasn't the galaxy-spanning empire the hegemony had envisioned, but it was something better. It was a galaxy at peace, maintained not through fear but through the simple recognition that cooperation served everyone's interests better than conflict. As they disembarked, Wraith reflected on the words that had started this transformation. "You're already dead," Sam had said, and he'd been absolutely right. The hegemony as it had existed was already dead the moment they'd captured a human vessel. But sometimes, Wraith had learned, death could be the beginning of something better.